So why simple assets? Well, we needed asset functionality on the EOS blockchain, and there was simply nothing out there. We needed it for an internal project that we wanted to do, and we thought, hey, maybe this is something that we could build and contribute to the EOS ecosystem. Once we started working on it, we sort of fell in love with the problem. We thought it was endlessly interesting. And we had a working version. We had a prototype when we heard first that DGoods was going to make an announcement about a digital goods standard. And then they made their announcement. You can see that this one was published 5 days before the making of this video. So now there are two standards. There is simple assets and there is DGoods. And I thought I would do a comparison, not least because the creators of DGoods have asked for community feedback, and they told us this when we did a video call with them a couple weeks ago as well. So I'll start with a very important similarity that makes me kind of happy. We are both open source and free standards. So we are on the same philosophical footing. Neither simple assets nor DGoods is trying to create artificial scarcity by having our own token that you have to use or anything like that. We're both just trying to empower others, empower game developers, empower new use cases for EOS, new use cases for blockchain, empower gamers, crypto enthusiasts, and that's great to see. We probably have more similarities than differences, but I think it's always the differences that are illuminating. So I made this little table and I'll talk through them. Firstly, some consideration was paid to how a market will display standards. So this DGoods specification pays a lot of attention to templates. And you can see here, for example, there's a template for a 3-dimensional game asset, a 2-dimensional game asset, a ticket, a piece of artwork, jewelry, and so on. And the idea is that you want the whole crypto ecosystem to have some common language so that, wallets that display assets will display them all in the same way, and authors can create assets with confidence that they'll be displayed in some appropriate way. We took a different approach. We have an author registration, which is completely optional. And when authors, the creators of assets, in other words, when they register, they specify some recommendations. Please display our assets this way. And then the marketplaces have the option of displaying it this way or not. So it's optional advice from the author, and then optional for marketplaces to follow that advice. In addition, we as the creators of simple assets are simply saying to authors, please have these 3 fields, image, name, description, and we are saying to marketplaces, please look for these 3 fields, image, name, as description, as sort of a baseline. The baseline for any asset is just to have these 3 properties to make it easy to display. Again, this recommendation can be ignored. This is a marketplace that we built. It is working, and we'll talk more about it in a future video, but you can see that this marketplace simply takes all the fields of an asset and simply displays them by category, immutable fields and mutable fields. And that's it. That's another approach to creating a marketplace. Okay, moving on. Types of tokens. So DGoods has fungible tokens in their specification, and as well as something called semi-fungible tokens. We are focusing on non-fungible with the idea to add fungible, and with the idea that if it's semi-fungible, if it needs a unique identifier, we'll just treat it as non-fungible. So we do not have this semi-fungible category. DGoods pays some attention to this symbol field, which, to be honest, we didn't completely understand. But you can see in their create action, you specify a symbol for your asset. We didn't understand that, and we don't have that. And in the next video, you'll be able to get a close look at all of our actions as well as our data structures. RAM considerations. So right now, this standard is only specifying transfers. And let me remind you, this is 0.1, so it's a very early standard with lots of room to grow and evolve as they get feedback. All right, so they just have this transfer functionality. We thought that for memory allocation, you should also have sort of an offer and claim. So instead of just pushing the asset from the owner to a new owner, you can also give the new owner the option of taking it and using their memory instead of the original owner's memory. Additionally, we have mutable fields, so I didn't see any way to update an asset here. So I don't know if DGoods just didn't specify that, or if they're looking at an asset as something that's always fixed. But as you can see in our simple market, we have the immutable fields that never change, and we have the fields that get updated as the item progresses. Maybe a game item can level up and stuff like that. So we have those two, mutable and immutable. We have some actions for lending and borrowing assets. And lastly, DGoods has this function, pause xfer, so the contract can pause transfers of tokens. We actually had something very similar. We had a little flag, transferable, and we imagined that a game might want to temporarily make some items non-transferable, and they could toggle this flag. We decided to throw that out for a few reasons, and we decided to give owners sort of absolute control over, so the author has nothing to do with transferring or not transferring a token. So you can imagine from the developer point of view, if you are developing under this standard, assuming it stays more or less the same, which it may not, it's just sort of a first draft at this point, but you can imagine developing under this standard, you may pause the transfer of certain tokens when some in-game action is happening. Whereas in simple assets, the developer would have to check the ownership at the beginning of some in-game action and then check it again at the end to make sure it hasn't changed, and maybe render that in-game action invalid if the ownership changed during it or something like that. So again, very early version, but at first glance, those are the important differences between DGoods and simple assets. We're going to get into a lot more detail in the next video, so stay tuned.